Hello and welcome once again to all of my brilliant students. The survey has come in, the votes have all been tallied, and Shakespeare has won. So we're going to be talking about Shakespeare in our next unit. And I know I can already hear you guys groaning from your computer screens, talking about, oh, Shakespeare is so difficult and Shakespeare is tough and I don't know how to understand him and he's like is just speaking in a whole bunch of gobbledygook. I just want to let you guys know this has the potential to be one of the best units that you have had in my class. Do you guys remember whenever you said that you weren't like any good at grammar and you guys ended up doing like 4 points better on your ACT? Yeah, do you guys remember that? Like whenever you said, "Oh, I'm not good at grammar," and then you all of a sudden are just like improving, like with by leaps and bounds. Like, go ahead and give yourself a little bit of credit because I think that there's a lot to offer here from Julius Caesar today. What I want to give you guys is I want you guys to gain a historical and contextual context of the play Julius Caesar by learning about the history of Rome and of what a tragedy is, right? And so, what I want to tell you from the right off from the very beginning is don't be too intimidated, okay? I'm going to be with you guys here the whole time, doing my best to interpret whatever the lines might say, or doing my best to interpret like the proper delivery of those lines and things like that. So I'll be with you the whole time. You can always ask questions. You can always rewatch the videos, and I'm going to see if I can weave in being able to watch portions of the play as we're going through it because it's in my opinion that this is a special medium. Plays and stage performances are special types of medium that or are a special type of medium that begs that demands that deserves to be observed. It deserves to be observed with the eyes and heard with the ears. It's meant to be performed from the stage, right? It's not just meant to be sat down and read through in a book and you just kind of like do your best to parse through exactly what it means. No, like the actors are actually supposed to be helping you. And so I always like having you guys watch Julius Caesar because it is first of all it is a really great play. Now it is historical in the sense that it is one of Shakespeare's histories, but it's by no means historically accurate. Okay, it's not historically accurate. It's called one of Shakespeare's histories because he's touching on a subject that was actually in the historical past, but he puts his own artistic spin on it, right? He takes his own artistic license. And that's what he's doing with the story of Julius Caesar, Just like how you can take Abraham Lincoln and have him fight a whole bunch of vampires, right? Like Shakespeare can go ahead and grab something from history and say, "Oh, well, you know what? I'm going to say a few things about this." And the things that he says are pretty interesting because the things that he talks about, the things that we have that Julius Caesar and Shakespeare have to offer us is lots of great discussion. Things on patriotism, gender, loyalty, fate, free will, pride, principles, government, lots more. The differences between like patriotism and treason. Which is more important, loyalty or competence? What is the relationship between a citizen and their government? What is the government obligated to do versus what is the citizen obligated to do, and so on and so forth. And I would recommend that you guys use your resources that you have available to you. For example, I gave you guys this big long sheet right here that is all your study guide questions. And if you just follow along with this as we go through the unit, you're not going to do bad here on these, okay? If you are filling in who the characters are, if you're filling in what the answers to the discussion questions are, you are going to ace every quiz and you're going to ace the final test at the end of this unit, okay? And so I would highly recommend using this resource to go through. I also just kind of as a courtesy, where did I put it? There it is. I also just kind of as a courtesy gave you guys your vocabulary words kind of right off the bat. These aren't like the worksheets. You don't have to do anything with this. This is just for you to like have and to have kind of in advance, okay? And then finally I have here in Monday, I have the actual text, okay? And so if you're going to be reading this, well, there we go. If you're going to be reading this, it's important to be able to kind of like maneuver through it. So yeah, you've got this play here, and I just want to point out to you, if I can get all the way up here to the first scene. There we go. Here we are in Act 1, and then it's going to have Scene 1, and anything that you see in italics is going to be stage directions, okay? And then you have over here lines, okay? You have the numbers, and it goes 0, 0, 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, so on and so forth. And what that's to let you know is that, hey, this is the first line, the second line, the third line, the fourth line, the fifth line. So if I ever refer to, okay, whenever Marullus speaks in the sixth line of the play or the seventh line of the play, you can go and you can find it easily and identify it, right? Now, if you're ever kind of lost, it's important to remember that up here you have Act 1, SC1. What that means is we're in Act 1, Scene 1, okay? So we're in Act 1, Scene 1, the very beginning of the play of Julius Caesar in the first few lines, right? And so that's kind of how you navigate your play script here, right? So if I skip all the way down, you can see that this is going to be Scene 3 and 4, okay? So it's Act 2, Scene 3 here and 4, because it's got two of the acts, one very short, or not act, but one of the scenes very short here at the beginning, and then it switches quickly over here to Scene 4, all right? So you can see where you are in the play. You can see it. If I ever use page numbers, I'm going to be using these page numbers for you, okay? And so just wanted to show that to you and show you what was available to you and how to navigate that. Also, I want you guys to know we're going to be doing quizzes, vocabulary, and we're going to be doing these discussion questions, which I see that a lot of you guys have already done, which I'm glad to see, right? And those do, of course, need to be about 5 to 8 sentences. It needs to be a good, well thought out paragraph, because these discussions are basically like that. That's kind of the crux of the whole thing. Is we're not going to be able to discuss these things in class, but these ideas, these bigger ideas, are why we study this. Is because it's identification of themes, and then us just kind of really picking through and saying, okay, well, what is he trying to say? And it's not always like super cut and dry, black and white, right? There is gray there. And this is actually a remarkably morally gray play, okay? It's not like really easy to go, oh, this is the good guy, this is the bad guy, these guys are definitely evil, this guy is definitely good, and he's wearing the white hat, and he's riding into town, and he's the sheriff. No, it's none of that, okay? It's a whole lot of internal turmoil, it's a whole lot of internal questioning, it's a whole lot of internal chaos that is then expressed externally, not just in the characters, but also in the very setting itself, okay? So let's go ahead and let's just dive right on in. I'll bring back up my notes. So I want to go ahead and I want to introduce you to this guy, all right? This guy's name is Julius Caesar. Caesar is basically this title from ancient Rome that basically means like the highest possible position that you can be at, and the highest possible position that can be attained as an elected official. And Caesar is the one who is known for saying Veni Vidi Vici, right? And it's this really cool line that basically means I came, I saw, and I conquered. So he was known as a really, really good general, and not just like tactically brilliant, but also politically brilliant. And also he was brilliant in the way that he interacted with his troops, okay? He was very personal, and he was very personable with his troops. And what you end up finding is that the whole reason why Julius Caesar was able to become Caesar in the first place is because you had an army that was not loyal to the state. It was not loyal to Rome. It was loyal to the guy who was paying them. And guess who was paying them? It was Julius Caesar. So Julius Caesar goes out, he conquers a whole bunch of territory for Rome, and then he comes back in. And after saying Veni Vidi Vici, which, by the way, that is, if you know any Latin, you know that's not actually how it's supposed to be pronounced. It's just that Veni Vidi Vici sounds way cooler than Winnie Weedy Wiki, which is the technical Latin way of saying it, but just go with Veni Vidi Vici. People will know what you're saying, right? So he goes, he conquers, and then he comes back and he goes, well, you know what? There's one thing I'm really good at. I think I'll conquer Rome. Takes his loyal army, marches right into the streets, and he ends up taking it over for himself and becoming, well, essentially a dictator, right? So that is the basic premise for our setup, the most possible basic setup that we can have for our play, okay? And this is a tragedy, and you already know that in literature, the series of unfortunate events by which one or more of the characters in the story has several misfortunes, and finally there's a disaster of epic proportions. We're talking about a catastrophe here, right? And so you guys already know that. And if you guys remember Booker's 7 basic plots and how basically it made that one little pyramid, like Freytag's pyramid each time, and it had those 5 different stages, tragedy falls into all 5 of those stages. It's its own section in Booker's 7 basic plots. He modeled it largely after Shakespeare, but Shakespeare was also modeling it after a whole bunch of other people too. Right? And so tragedies don't always fall neatly into these parameters, but Shakespeare's do. Shakespeare's tragedies fall into these parameters, even down to the act. Like Act 1, you have happy times, okay? Things are going great. Usually there is some sort of festival, there's a celebration. In our case, we're actually going to be participating. Our characters are participating in the Feast of Lupercal, which is a big deal for Romans. And then in Act 2, you introduce the problem. And in this case, the problem is, oh my gosh, Caesar has come, he's seized power, and now he's the big guy in charge, right? Whereas once we were a republic where we had members who were electing our officials, now Caesar has done away with that. Caesar's the one who's in charge, right? Well, the problem becomes a crisis, and so people decide, you know what, maybe we should off this guy. Let's get him out of there. Let's make sure that Rome stays a republic, right? And so in Act 3 is usually whenever the problem becomes a crisis, and I don't know. This is 2,000 years old now, so I kind of hate. I don't feel like I'm spoiling anything, but Caesar dies. Okay, Caesar gets murdered and assassinated by his enemies, but really he ends up. Really, the one that hurts the most is whenever he gets betrayed by his own best friend. Okay, and so he has this problem, or you have this problem that becomes a crisis, and the crisis ends up not being Caesar itself. It ends up being the aftermath after Caesar ends up getting killed, right? So after Caesar ends up getting killed, things begin to spin out of control. The characters are unable to prevent the problem, and then in Act 5, the final problem results in a catastrophic, in some huge catastrophic mess. And usually in a Shakespearean tragedy, you know that you're at the end whenever there's just a bunch of bodies on the stage. I'm not joking. Like Shakespeare is actually like. Whether you guys realize this or not, but Shakespeare in tragedy is actually super metal, because like you go through these 4 acts, things spiral out of control until finally there are sword fights, there's betrayal, there's stabbing in the back, and like the stage is just covered in dead bodies. And that is in essence that is the nugget of what a Shakespearean tragedy is. All right? So, the setting of this play is actually Rome. And so you have a whole bunch of political intrigue, you have magic and fortune telling, and you have military conquest. So, the setting of this play is about 50 BC or so. Like Julius Caesar was born almost exactly 100 BC, and then he rose to power for the next 50 years, and now he's actually kind of an old man. So maybe it's like 33 BC or so. I can't remember the exact date that Caesar was assassinated. But there's lots of political intrigue, there's magic and fortune telling, there's military conquest and strategy, there's a bunch of scheming, cloak and dagger type of stuff. And if that sounds familiar, it's because it's a trope that has become more and more popular in even in our modern day culture, right? The Witcher has a lot of those same sort of ideas and themes, right? The Game of Thrones is basically like all 3 of those tick, 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 right? Even something like The Dragon Prince, political intrigue, military conquest, magic, they all have these things, right? And so that is like if you're trying to think of a genre for Julius Caesar to fall into, a history that has a history that has a twist like these sort of shows and these sort of films, I would say is kind of like what you're looking at with Julius Caesar. So just to let you know what you're getting yourself into, okay? So let's go ahead and get into the historical context. Caesar is the most powerful man in Rome and has recently returned to the city after months of fighting abroad. Okay, so I was right. Yeah, he was born 100 BC. He married this woman named Cornelia at 18 years old and had a daughter named Julia. And then, not long after that, Cornelia dies, and Caesar marries another woman named Pompeia. All right, so he has a couple of wives. One of who ends up passing away. But Julius Caesar was also notorious for. He was also notorious for his promiscuity. Right? He wasn't exactly picky. I would describe him as not exactly picky whenever it comes to his forays into love. And so he does marry Pompeia. He does have a daughter named Julia. They are nobles. Okay, they are nobles, and Julia ends up becoming especially important because of what happens later on. Now, really quickly, I want to talk to you about the different types of government that kind of come up in this play. All right. Monarchy is whenever a king has complete rule over Rome or a complete rule over a region or a territory. Right. And so, like, that king has the divine decree. They have the divine mandate of being obeyed, but also like being in service to the people, right? And that's kind of like the idea of monarchy. Okay, it became really, really like much more popularized, especially throughout medieval Europe. And the idea of a monarchy was that, hey, we are noble, like we have been set apart, we have been appointed by the heavens to be the divine, to be the divine purveyors of the state, of government, right? Well, Rome overthrew their king and was in fact one of the very first places to overthrow a king. They said, we're not going to do a king, we're going to try something else, okay? And they modeled a lot of what their ideas were after the Greeks. Now, in Greece, you had a true democracy where every single vote counted, but in Roman government, it's a republic. And what a republic is you have elected officials who then elect your highest officials, if that makes any sense. You have like this kind of class of people. All right, you have this kind of class of people that represent their constituents, and they're the only ones who can vote, but they can vote on behalf of like whatever subset that they're coming from, right? And usually those people are very rich, and usually those people are very powerful. And so and usually those people are almost, they're exclusively men, and they're exclusively men that own property. Okay. And so if that sounds kind of familiar, it's because basically our founding fathers in the United States modeled almost everything that we do after a lot of the Roman government. And so I find that as we move through our own American history, I find that studying up on the Roman history becomes just as it becomes more and more important every year, it seems like. Okay, so the Republic is founded on this idea that is kind of like democracy, but it's democracy with extra steps, if that makes any sense. It's like, hey, we've got like this ruling class of people that is actually like, we've got quite a few of them. There's a whole bunch of ruling class of these people, but those people can vote for our elected officials, and they're the ones who represent us. They're the ones who make policy and changes like that. Now, a dictatorship is completely different. It's a little bit different than the monarchy, because monarchies don't always have the entirety of the seat of power on the throne. Okay, there's oftentimes there's an arrangement where power is sometimes shared, but essentially in a monarchy, the word of the king is law, right? In a dictatorship, the word of the dictator is law, and it is religion, and it is faith, and it is culture, and it is basically, it doesn't end at what is just written down in laws. Like the word of the dictator is like, you have to accept it as truth. You have to accept it as even if it's not true, you still have to accept it because the dictator has that kind of power. Okay, they have that kind of power to where your rights don't matter. All right, and I mean monarchy is kind of similar, but the dictatorship is like none of your rights matter. It doesn't like I have complete and absolute control specifically over the armies. Okay, and it's that separation between between the powers of the dictator and the policing force, whether that be an army or the police or whatever it might be, that is super crucial. That's really, really important, all right? Because in a dictatorship, that's all melded into one, all right? You have modern day dictatorships. Whenever you go to a place like North Korea, that's a modern day dictatorship, right? Like the dictators of North Korea have absolute and complete control over specifically their armies, and they can use the armies against their citizens. In the United States, we're different. We're different because one of the branches of government, our branches of government are executive, they're judicial, and they're legislative, right? And none of those are armed. Okay, none of those are supposed to be the end all be like none of like the army is not the fourth branch of government, and if it ever did become the fourth branch of government, then our democracy is in big trouble, because that means that we are one step away from a dictatorship or a monarchy. So this is just wanted to show you guys what the Roman Empire looks like. You can see that the Roman Empire stretches all the way from over here in Spain all the way over here towards Turkey and the Middle East. This is Israel right down in here. This is actually that's not Egypt. That's North Africa right there. You have Greece. You have Italy. You have like basically like the Mediterranean right here in the north, as well as the south, is pretty much covered by Rome. And that's what Julius Caesar is born into. He is born into a Roman engine that is supremely powerful as far as its state power, because it is the strongest empire in the ancient world as far as trade, because of their roads, as far as culture, because of their expansiveness, and their army, because everything in the Roman society was geared towards this gigantic army engine, right? It was geared towards this. This forceful might, right? And so you get a guy like Julius Caesar who comes in here and he expands the territory even more. This is what happens after Julius Caesar. He has conquered all of France. He's conquered almost the entirety of Spain, gotten a lot more of Turkey over here. He's getting down here right into Israel, and he's gone from not only North Africa, but also all the way over here to closer to Egypt, right? And so this is what Julius Caesar did. And I would love to be able to tell you how Julius Caesar came in here and was able to conquer the Gallic peoples and what is it that made him such a brilliant military strategist. But we just don't have time for that today. Maybe I'll be able to if you guys are interested, I could make a video on the historical, like, just might and power of the Roman army machine, okay? And I would be totally willing to do that, but it would probably be some bonus, okay? So at the time, like, Julius Caesar is going through, like, France, like, right in here. Whenever Julius Caesar is going through France, you have what is called a triumvirate going on in Rome, all right? Now, it's supposed to be a republic, but the three most powerful guys are the following. You have Pompey, who is a great politician and Caesar's son-in-law who married Julia. That's why Julia comes up, is because Pompey marries Julia. Pompey and Caesar are now extended family, okay? Pompey and Caesar, like, Caesar is his father-in-law, Pompey is his son-in-law, right? And Pompey is one of those guys that came up, and he was born with a silver spoon in hand. He was noble from the very beginning. Caesar, on the other hand, was kind of like this scrub who, like, ended up going through the ranks of the army, doing better there, getting elected in some local positions, and he basically, like, had to work his way up, right? Pompey was noble. Caesar was, like, right there in the middle class, worked himself up, and Crassus is the wealthiest man in Rome. Now, the reason why Crassus is the wealthiest man in Rome is because he is basically a professional extortionist, okay? So another aspect of the way that our state runs here in the United States is you have what are called services, right? The police are a service, your education is a service, the fire department is a service, all right? Like you are paying for the fire department through things like taxes. You're paying for the fire department through things like fines, through things like the way that the government, the way that your state, the way that your local city like generates revenue is usually through those taxes, and then they provide services including roads, fire departments, and things like that. Well, back then, fire departments were not state run. Fire departments were privately owned. And if you think that that's a good idea, well, just wait until what happens, because Crassus is the guy who goes around and he's like the most prolific firefighter in all of Rome. And that's not what you think it is. He's not going up and he's not actually fighting fires. He has basically like these teams that are on standby at any given time. And whenever someone's house catches on fire, those guys show up. Crassus goes up to the person whose house is on fire and says, "Hey, do you want me to put it out?" And they're like, "Yes, please. Oh my God, that's my house." And Crassus goes, "All right, well, how much are you willing to pay for it?" He's that kind of firefighter. And the thing is that like, I mean, it worked. Like as gross and disgusting and as extortionist as that is, I mean, like, it worked. He got super, super rich, right? He was able to ascend, like, and not only that, but he would also like begin to sell like what is like a preliminary sort of like fire insurance, right? To where it's like, okay, I will let you buy a subscription of my fire department services, and you will pay me every month, and then we will come, and if there is a fire at your house during that month, we will come and put it out. But if you ever cancel your subscription, I mean, you're on your own. Sorry. All right. Well, I mean, I don't know about you, but I'm kind of glad. I like our system a little bit better. I like that I have reliable firemen that if like all of a sudden my house is going up in a blaze of glory, they're going to be at the front door, like knocking it down to come and save me and my family, and to hopefully put out the fire before anything like catastrophic happens, right? As opposed to like sitting out there with a fire marshal trying to negotiate a price while my house is burning. Okay, so that's the triumvirate, the three most powerful men in all of Rome. And the job of the triumvirate was to establish order in Rome. Things had been hectic for quite some time, and so like these three guys were basically like the cogs, or they were kind of like the guys who were moving the cogs of the entire state, right? Now, it's not long before the triumvirate breaks. In 59 BC, Pompey marries Caesar's daughter Julia, right? And then just 5 years later, she dies. Okay? And so the only connection between Caesar and Pompey, basically this was like an alliance, okay? This was an alliance through marriage, and the only thing that was connecting them was Julia. And now Pompey and Caesar don't have that connection. They're two of the most powerful men in all of Rome, and they begin to become the bitterest of rivals. Caesar keeps on going off into all of these different territories. He keeps on bringing back tons and tons of money. He brings back he brings back human slaves. That's actually the primary. That was actually the primary import, if you will, of all of the conquered territories of Rome. And it's one of the darker sides of Rome that people don't talk about. But human chattel, like the ownership of humans, is basically how Rome was built. Okay, and you know how they say it wasn't built in a day? Well, yeah, because the slaves were all the ones that were building it. Okay, like the slaves, like you ended up with just like multiple like excursions into all of these different campaigns, and within those campaigns you would end up getting loot, you would end up getting resources, you would end up getting land, and then you would end up getting slaves. Okay, and so all of those things were making Caesar and Rome filthy stinking rich. Pompey, on the other hand, is over there in Rome, and he's basically got to keep the government moving, right? And so he begins to get really, really threatened by Caesar, which is fair, okay? Like, he should be threatened by Caesar. This dude is ambitious, right? And so 1 year later, after Julia dies, Crassus dies. So you got the triumvirate, right? The connection between Julius and Pompey is now gone. Julia is dead, right? And now Crassus is dead, right? So you've only got the two, okay? And so Caesar and Pompey are set directly against each other. All right. So what Caesar has done is he's done a prolific military career, and his armies have conquered multiple countries. Okay. Now, after Crassus was killed, trouble begins to develop between Pompey and Caesar, and Caesar ends up actually going to war with Pompey and his sons. Okay. And so, like, he's not quite at war with them yet. The way that the whole thing started is that Caesar was off in France, modern day France, so at the time they were calling it Gaul, and Pompey, as well as others in the Roman Senate, were disturbed by Caesar's growing ambition, said, oh man, this guy's going to be trouble if he ever comes back. And so what they told him that they had to do is Pompey persuades the Senate to order Caesar to break up his army and return home. Hey, thanks. You did a great job. We appreciate everything you did in Gaul. Go ahead, break up your army, give that back over to us, to Rome, give it back to the state, and then return to Rome. Well, instead, Caesar is sitting there and he's just like, I pay these guys. They're loyal to me. Right? They're like, I'm the one who has brought them fame and fortune and everything that they've asked for. So what Caesar does is he crosses the Rubicon, is what it's called, and there's this famous line, and he says the die is cast. Okay, because what he's saying there is, not sure if this is going to work. This is my big gambit. I'm rolling the dice on this one, and he invades Rome, and they don't resist him. Okay, he wasn't sure if they were going to resist. He wasn't sure what kind of reception he would get, but he goes and he takes control of all of Rome, ends up becoming dictator at the point of a sword. All right, and Pompey, who is his arch rival, ends up having to go, and he ends up having to run off. He ends up having to retreat all the way to Egypt, where he was later assassinated by Ptolemy II. Because Ptolemy II wanted to get in good with the Romans, and he wanted to basically secure his power against his own sister, whose name was Cleopatra. Maybe you've heard of her. And so whenever Ptolemy assassinates Pompey, what ends up happening is Caesar gets super angry, goes over to Egypt. He goes over to Egypt and he kills Ptolemy instead. He says, hey, that dude was mine. He was on my list. You killed him, and so therefore I'm going to kill you. So he kills Ptolemy, puts Cleopatra in power, and then he goes running off to Spain to find Pompey's sons in Spain and kill them. All right. So that's where we kind of end up. We have Caesar defeating and killing Pompey's sons in Spain, and then after that, this is where the play begins. Caesar is now refusing to enter Rome as an ordinary citizen after the war with Pompey's sons. So he marches his army on Rome and he takes over the government at this point. Okay, he's done it twice now. He's crossed the Rubicon into Rome, chased Pompey away, gone and Pompey gets assassinated. Pompey's sons are in Spain. He goes over to Spain. He kills Pompey's sons, right? Which, by the way, some of them are his grandsons. Okay, like, wrap your head around that. Grandpa is going to Spain to kill his own grandsons. All right, and then he returns, and it's upon this triumphant return that our play begins. Okay, so whenever Julius Caesar comes back, the people love him, all right? He is made dictator for life willingly, all right? And Julius Caesar gains the support of the people. And we're talking about not the senators. We're not talking about the nobles. We're not talking about the people who are in power. We are talking about your everyday average Joe, right? And so this is your Dictator Handbook 101. Okay, Dictator Handbook 101, as laid down by Caesar and then followed by just about everybody else throughout history, is you spend money for public entertainment. All right, you distract your people. Okay, there's this concept called bread and circus, and as long as your people have enough food to get them through the week, and as long as they are distracted by entertainment, then they will be pliable and they will be willing to accept whatever it is whatever policy that you push forward. And as a dictator, like, that's how you keep your people peaceful, is you just give them, you make sure they've got enough to eat, you make sure that they have enough to stay entertained, and like, you're hunky-dory to basically do whatever you want. Okay, he establishes laws that freed farmers and tradesmen from heavy taxes. Okay, so he gave some of the commoners rather than the noblemen tax cuts. He promises to improve the overall economy. There's oftentimes in There's oftentimes in dictatorships like this an emphasis on money, on wealth, rather than and we're talking about like the wealth of the state. There is specifically an emphasis on our country is doing better, or our city is doing better, or Rome is doing better. And so therefore, because Rome is doing better, you must be doing better. And that's not necessarily always true, right? He says, I promise to improve the overall economy, but that doesn't mean that the most vulnerable people, aka the elderly, the sick, and children, are okay, right? Like Rome is still a very, very dark place for these people still, all right? Even though the economy has improved, okay? So he also suggests new bills that were oftentimes super popular, and they were approved by the Senate. He also reorganized the army so that he could consolidate his own power with men who were loyal to him, and he began to improve the way that the provinces were governed. So is he a dictator? Yes, but he's a very capable dictator. One of the things that made him such a capable dictator is that he was really, really good at organizing people. Okay. And so because Caesar was able to organize people, because he was able to kind of play the game, and because he was able to maximize the wealth of the people that were most important for him to maintain power, he was able to maintain that power and basically come in and invade Rome. And so the people love him. We're going to end up ending it right there today because next we're going to be talking about the play itself and exactly what some of the context are for the play. Again, there's so much that I could talk to you guys about this one. I'm trying to keep my videos not super long, but I could go on and on and on because this is my wheelhouse, man, is like all of this cool Roman stuff, all of this cool history, and then where that intersects with art and creativity and so on and so forth. So I hope that you guys are going to enjoy this. I hope that you guys are going to enjoy this unit, and it honestly has a whole lot to offer. It has a whole, and I think genuinely it has more to offer every single year. All right. So be diligent, stay diligent. Keep up with your vocabulary, keep up with your discussion questions, and keep up with the quizzes. And I know that you guys are going to have a great time, and we're going to finish out the semester in a great way. Don't stop learning, my brilliant students. I'll see you guys later.